we're supposed to start with Einstein. What's your favorite Einstein quote? I don't know. My favorite Einstein quote is that the equivalence of an inertial mass being accelerated in a non-inertial frame of reference indicates the impact of gravitational force on bodies is independent of the nature of that body. Isn't that yours? I thought that was everyone's. I thought that was everyone's favorite. That's bizarre. Okay, all right, well, let's get back to payments then. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to ask you to very quickly introduce yourself to the audience. Unfortunately, many of them can't read, and so the biographies that are in the... So you need to give them a quick indication of who you are and what your perspective is, and then we'll start talking technology. So let's start down the far end. Suzan, please.
So, Suzan Kereere, I lead merchant and acquiring at Visa. My perspective is open platforms will change the way the world works, and I'm excited to talk about anything disruptive because we are open for business.
Excellent stuff. So you're kind of really more on the kind of global acquiring acceptance side of things?
I lead acquiring in Europe, which includes global and regional acquirers.
See, you were being too modest. I was just...
Am I?
Thank you.
I thought we should be short to start so we can get long-winded on the things that matter.
We want these people to know it's a power panel. Okay, now Richard, go on.
Okay, so Richard Harris, I lead Feedzai's business outside of the US, so whether it's happening in Brazil, China, or anywhere in between, that's my opportunity, as they say.
None of these people have ever heard of Feedzai, so you need to mention.
So we're an AI and machine learning platform,
right.
Powering $3 or $4 billion a day in decisioning.
Who should we hear from next? Payvision, Gijs.
Gijs, yeah. Gijs Opberg.
I'm very uncomfortable with Dutch words.
No worries.
Sorry, it just...
I'm very used to it, so that's kind of... Gijs Opberg, I'm the CEO of Payvision, global card acquiring, and our omni-channel payment platform, aCapture.
And you just got bought by a huge bank.
We've got a strategic investment, yes. We're still in ourselves. But that makes it for us very, very interesting in bringing the business to the next levels. Also in regards to the subjects we're going to talk about today more.
Excellent. All right, let's go in the middle. We'll save Silvia for last. Go on.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning. Guten Tag, Berlin. My name is Seamus Smith. I'm the head of payments and banking globally for Sage. Sage is a software and technology business specializing in accounting, payroll, people management, and payments and banking software. We're very excited, Dave, about the technology revolution pervading fintech, payments and banking. I have a theory of convergence. It's been mentioned a couple of times here already that regulation, technology, data science, artificial intelligence are all converging to really change our world. So we think a lot of tailwinds in a business like ours, supporting about 3 million SMEs across 23 markets. We're excited about delivering services in our platform too.
And you're based in the Nordics as well?
I'm based in
Newcastle.
London.
I mean, it's broadly
based in London, but our corporate headquarters is in the Nordics, yes.
Silvia, please.
Hello, I'm Silvia Mensdorff. I work for ACI Worldwide, and I lead our business here in Europe. For those of you that don't know ACI Worldwide, we provide payment solutions. We're a pay tech company, software that we provide both in the cloud, in platforms, and on-premise. And we underpin a lot of the payment processing across the world.
So what I want to do is I want to sort of do it in sort of two parts. So first of all, I just want to get your general feelings about, because we mentioned a lot of different technologies earlier on. And actually there were some they didn't mention, like biometrics and things. So first of all, I want to get your feeling on the kind of the different technologies that are jockeying for your attention at the moment out there. And then we'll talk a little bit about the technologies that are having an impact on your business at the moment. So if we talk about the general technology space, who wants to kick off? What are the technologies that these people should be paying attention to right now?
So if I may kick off, I think in terms of technology, we're now reaching a stage where payments, instead of being led by technology, can actually be led by context. If you think about it, the technology that we had has always enabled us to improve payments. We're now getting to a stage with open APIs that we can actually integrate the payment into the experience as a consumer and into the experience as a merchant. And I think that's what we need to be looking at, taking it forward.
So APIs and opening, okay, so everyone would agree with that. So that's quite uncontroversial, really, isn't it?
Boring, huh?
Everybody thinks that's true. Give me another technology.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's technology per se. I know you want us to go there, but I do think what's changed our point of view most recently is the fact that consumers who, I think if you think of our ecosystem, which generally sits between businesses or across businesses. But how consumers work across technologies has definitely impacted where we make investments. Most of the investments we make tend to be around 3 or 4 core pillars. Security, so lots and lots of stuff around cybersecurity. Controls, the ability to distribute controls as opposed to own them and center them. So how do we do more things, distributed ledger things that give people the easiest access to insights and information. Everything around interoperability. What do you do to disassociate yourself around the rules that govern how transactions flow in a network, but still make them interoperable around the world? And candidly, while we talk a lot about mobile digital API, I agree with the first point, which is ultimately any technology that lets us help businesses get close to their consumer in flight, online, all the time, is interesting. So if you look at all the bets we're placing, the majority of bets still sit around the data and infrastructure. So cybersecurity all day long. Anything.
I think that's worth picking up on. So the security thing, you mentioned that a couple of times. I mean, that's clearly core to it on the sort of payment side. So, but actually, I sort of feel on the security side, technology is doing all right for us at the moment, isn't it? I mean, aren't we quite optimistic about new technology in the security space?
You're going to look at me?
Yes, at this
of
point.
Course I am.
Okay.
Because I work for a security company.
What is your technology doing to help with this stuff? Then?
So I think the points all stand, and I think the big difference that's happening now in the space is, yes, there are open APIs, and yes, there's lots of data, and that's fantastic. But the thing is, that value of that data is now. So the whole point is being able to utilize that data at the point that it's generated and be able to process that in real time. So to sort of build on what you said, it's all the data all the time in real time is really where we're going. So it's not about having data lakes where you can collect insights and analytics and find out what did I do last month. It's about this consumer's right in front of me right now. What do I know about them? What have they done in the last 30 seconds, the last 5 minutes, the day, week, month, year? What did they do this time last year? You need all of that context, and that's data contextualization. That's really where we're going. It's having the power in a system to be able to bring all of that data into the decisioning process at that moment, at that critical second, that they're with you, rather than say 3 weeks later, oh, it would have been great to send them an offer, let's send them an email. You know, that's where we've been. Where we are now is, right, this thing is happening right now, what do I do? That's really the challenge.
And what I like about that is I think people know different things about individuals, whether they're consumers or businesses, at different times. That's why we like two-sided propositions. You think about whitelisting. I think merchants have as much a role to play in whitelisting as banks do, because merchants know certain things about their buyers. They know velocity, they know repeated purchases, they know purchase types. Banks know a bunch of things about that buyer and that transaction and that line spend. I think we've got to find a way over time to make data so accessible to the individual that's sitting in front of either the point of purchase or that consumer, and make the system, the buying and selling of things, just more robust. I think we've been too closed about data and who owns it. I think that open APIs will change that somewhat.
But the tidal waves of data that June was talking about, and so it's one thing to say, well, we have all these millions of transactions and all of this point of sale data, but actually to take that next step, to actually learn anything from that, it must be quite hard. Otherwise, people would already have done it, and they wouldn't be sending me Lady Gaga offers. So you're saying AI and machine learning in that space, right?
It's partly that, but actually The AI machine learning is and I'll talk about this tomorrow in more detail, but the AI machine learning is kind of the icing on the cake, if you like. That's the bit at the front which everybody gets excited about because it sounds sexy. But the hard bit is how do you get the data in a state to be accessible to the machine learning to actually get insights out of it. And that's the hard engineering problem that you've got to solve.
So even at that sort of basic level, there's work to be done, right?
Yes, absolutely. But what we have seen, especially looking at data also from different perspectives over the last couple of years, is if you try to disrupt smaller pieces of the business by enabling data, is way less effective than trying to create the open platforms and combining all sorts of data to really make the whole industry and your whole proposition more effective. So that's what we start looking at is taking the real big picture from different angles and with the open platforms really create a more efficient solution instead of only reducing a smaller problem within the industry.
Okay, so I buy APIs, open data, AI, machine learning. That all seems quite plausible. Seamus, throw another couple of new technologies in that you think are going to have an impact.
Well, I do. I just would dwell on the AI piece because that is our number one piece. So we own and operate our own artificial intelligence business, developers, and capability.
You?
Yeah, we do. And interestingly, if this conference was a convention of lawyers, right, we'd be thinking and worrying about next year's conference only needing one block of attendees as opposed to 5. That's the level of displacement and disruption that's going on in the legal profession, the medical profession, and a number of others. In payments, banking-related services, we don't have so much worry about displacement, I don't think. We've got a huge opportunity because I have no doubt that is going to change. It's going to be a key constituent of the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, will be one of the primary drivers and manifests of that will be artificial intelligence. I've seen already some of our lab developments changing the nature of what we do in accounting software as a regressive look back at a point in time and what happened in a business. And actually what AI is doing for us is it's providing services to customers that give them an opportunity to look into the future and proactively run their business and proactively call out where they've got funding gaps in their business, getting proactive access to finance, making payments forward dated, looking at cash flow. These sorts of things are so powerful and they will be so quickly embraced by end users. They will drive a massive transformation in the whole ecosystem of payments, banking, processing, acquiring, issuing services. So I really do think AI will be.
I think you're right.
Absolutely.
So if we just go back to Nigel's Einstein theme again, so AI is effectively a kind of event horizon in this space, in the sense that the disruption that AI will cause is so great, it's very difficult to construct any realistic models of what the business is going to look like after that hits. But we're still 5 years away maybe from that really having. These are just baby steps at the moment, aren't they? Or are you guys telling us that the AI is already? Because if the AI is that smart, why isn't it running things now?
I'm going to say it is running things.
It's closer than we think. I think it's closer.
You think it's closer?
I mean,
you think this?
If you've got one of these in your pocket, that's already connected to an AI, almost certainly, whether it's run by Google or whether it's run by Apple. I was mucking around at the weekend getting it to turn my lights on at home. That took me 5 minutes to set up. That kind of stuff is a fun application of AI. And yes, half of us are building chatbots to connect to things in banking or in merchants. But the hardcore stuff that's happening on the back end.
Okay, so the AI that this is connected to says, do I want to go to Ed Sheeran for the Brits Week 2018? Do you think I want to go to Ed Sheeran?
I don't know. I'm not sure about your music taste.
AI, you're bigging it up, but it's really a long way away. I mean, we're very carried away with AI at the moment.
Well, let me give you some examples. So if you look at what we're doing with some acquirers right now, most of you working in the acquiring space will be saying, okay, my merchant's going to hit a limit. I'm going to run a daily, weekly, monthly report. Who hits the limit? Okay, how do I then reach out to them and change their acquiring limit? Why are you not doing that with predictive analytics and AI in the short term to say, well, this one's going to hit their limit this week? Why are we not reaching out to them to proactively reset their controls? We're doing that kind of thing with tier 1 banks now to raise the number of people who can open accounts with one of the biggest banks in the US, digital bank. We've raised the number of account acceptances they've got by 70%. So this is creating financial inclusion on a mass scale in America. We're increasing the number of acceptances across one of the biggest debit networks in the US, where we're processing $3.5 billion a day on one network with AI to increase the amount of acceptance. So those things are big, and they're in market, and they're happening. And that's real-time decisions
using AI already?
5 milliseconds.
We've used some form of machine learning for decades, right? Look at all of our risk and underwriting. You couldn't build a scale of our risk methods without an understanding of behavior. Behavior understanding is driven by taking tons and tons of data and driving insights. But quite honestly, I don't know if it's about world domination. I know, David, you love these world domination theories.
That's all I'm interested in.
I know, but I want to shift us just a touch and say, we all have to be guided somewhat by where consumers are going, right? And I go back to the beginning of the conversation that was kicked off. Look at one of the most immersive experiences that I love, which is what happens at Starbucks around the world every day, and what's happening at places like Starbucks Reserve, which is the most immersive experience on the planet, right? If you love the kind of coffee that Starbucks produces, and I know not everyone does, but if you happen to love it the way I do, and you go into a Reserve store and you go to the one they just opened in China, it's 30,000 square feet, 400 people working in the store with that device, and I should have mine on hand. You can literally follow a coffee bean from the roaster all the way through to the time the filtered coffee shows up in your cup. You can engage with what the machines are doing. You can have immersive experiences. You can do coffee chats. You can buy and pay for your coffee, all because of what data insights, a little app, which of course in this case is driven by Taibo, and what Starbucks has done on the ground in China. That's what consumers are doing at the extreme on experiences. And all of that is driven by, sorry, just to finish, the critical ingredients, data.
Yes, I was going to say,
right?
that takes us back to data.
Machine learning, what goes on in-app, the ability to authenticate who you are, some form of gaming. You couldn't do that anywhere. Now, is Starbucks for everyone? No. But whether you're at Louis Vuitton or Staples or anywhere now, most merchants are saying, how do I solve a customer problem to get them to engage with my brand more? And I think that's world domination. Customers, their expectations, and the UX. That's world domination. Everything else is interesting until we give these merchants the tools they need to drive and convert more.
So I think we're getting a pretty consistent picture here that the stuff that was kicking off, the discussions that were starting last year, but should be focused more on data. And now we have the technologies to collect the data from point of sale. We have the technologies to manage it securely. And now we're starting to get the technologies to actually analyze it and process it. Okay, so I think I buy all that sort of stuff. But there's a whole other set of technologies, which I'm guessing you guys are looking at as well, which we haven't touched on yet. So let me throw a few of those at you and see if you're working with any of those. So let's pick a couple at random. Let's start with biometrics. So who's playing around with biometrics at the moment? Nobody. Okay, so that's...
No, we.
All right, okay.
We as well.
What are you doing with biometrics?
We actually do it on a site. It's not within Payvision, with a separate investment. We invested in a spin-off of the University of Amsterdam in deep learning, in facial recognition, emotion recognition. So you can actually have more targeted data about your consumers in store and combine that with the whole experience. So it's a side project which we're going to take later into payments and into Payvision.
That's cool. So as you walk into the store just recognizes who you are.
Your mood,
they
your
collect
age,
all
your
the
gender.
where you go and what you're looking at, that kind of thing. So, and if that wasn't illegal under GDPR, that would be a fantastic opportunity.
It would be if you could recognize the person itself, but we only create metadata.
The
metadata is all we create, so it's not bringing back to individual persons in any way.
Has anyone actually, that Amazon store that I keep reading about in the paper, where they just look at your face, you just pick up your can of Coke and walk out? Do you guys see that as going anywhere? Are you excited about that?
I'm excited.
Look excited. I'm not excited about it. You don't look. Are you excited about it?
I think I love and really enjoy good payment experiences, and I think all the payments expert in this room are probably excited by it. But I think we got to remember that usually consumers, payments is not the first thing they want to think about.
But in that example, there is no payment experience. You just
I know,
you pick up
and
a can
so
of
here
Coke and
comes my
walk
worry.
out.
Here comes my worry. And I think this is something that we humans got to solve, and maybe machine learning can help us with this. I have 3 children, and in this digital age, we're going away from cash. I don't give them cash payments. It's all in their bank account. But the problem is, when you pay, it's still exchange of value. So how do we humans remember that we're actually exchanging value here, and that, you know, the book doesn't just arrive and you forgot you paid and suddenly all your money is gone? So I think there's one technology we got to figure out, which is we still have to give people the feeling that they're exchanging value, they're doing a trade, and the money is not just poof gone. Everybody talks about frictionless payments. I think we need to friction right payments.
Sure, I saw a thing like a couple of years ago. I don't think it was here. Somebody they had a payment ring, right? So when you paid, I think it was on your Visa card, but I can't remember. It had a little spike in it. So every time you paid for it, it pricked you.
No, my husband would love that. Every time I buy shoes, I get slowly electrocuted.
Well, you're not getting excited about biometrics, so let's pick something else.
It's just another source of data.
Actually,
Another source of data to you.
we are excited about biometrics. I mean, I wouldn't say that we're only focused on biometrics. We think all kinds of ways of using some way to authenticate the consumer is a good thing. So whether it's biometrics or voice, any form of IDing is good. So here's what we've done.
The biometric authentication, as you've just mentioned, yes, that's red hot. Because for consumers, that's a convenience experience, right? So
that's right. But the way consumers behave in different contexts vary. So car manufacturers are interested in voice. A store like Amazon is interested in facial recognition. Another retailer may be interested in something different. So what we've done is actually built a framework that says, you choose how you want to authenticate and let it be inherent in what types of experiences you want to drive for your consumer.
But as I understand it, there's no resistance from consumers in that space because to consumers, biometrics are convenient, right? So that's an easy technology to move into that space.
But that's also only true depending on where you live. So if you're in the Netherlands, ideal is perhaps for me like crazy. It's lots of friction. But for people in the Netherlands, that means that's good. They have some assurance that their payment is secure. If you're in the US and you love Amazon all day, you never want to see the payment, right? So our job, I think, as an ecosystem is to figure out what's the right balance. And if payments have to be completely invisible, let's go ahead and make them completely invisible.
Yeah, I think the US is a bad example because nobody in the US cares about security. It's just
hang on a second. I'm from the US.
It's half of all the card fraud in the world
example.
in the US. So I'm happy to say because we've exported it all over the last few years. All right, let me throw another one at you then. So, all right, biometrics. Okay, we biometric authentication strong. Spooky biometric identification. Not so sure about, but it's on board. Internet of Things. What are you doing about Internet of Things? Come on. Don't we want to turn everything into a POS terminal? I mean, shouldn't that we have that goal? You must be doing something with IoT.
The token, look, CyberSource itself holds, I think, over 1 million tokens in one little platform. It's an amazing thing. But the token for us is fundamentally the thing that will continue to evolve how and where payments happen, right? So the token is where we focused everything around IoT because we need to embed our payment experience, invisible or not, somewhere in a device, and whether it's machine-to-machine payments over time or some other way to pay. Tokens for us are at the core of all that, alongside everything else that sort of holds that ecosystem together.
So
I do IoT stuff.
Yeah, I mean, actually what we're seeing in IoT is probably the opposite of that. It's the fact that there is no security in the IoT mostly out there. So you've just got a huge amount of computers which are somebody else's computer. They're just a big cloud which are available. So one of our merchants the other week had a bot attack over a weekend where we stopped over $3 million, 100% of the attacks from a bot attack in 12 hours. Now, we could do that because we were using the right kind of algorithms and things, but a lot of it was about...
What was the bot attacking?
So it was attacking an online retailer, so a seller of high-end goods.
This is because people's toasters have been taken over, and
in some cases, yes, you can see that there are fridge IDs and things like that in there.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to actually filter through and say, is it realistic that a fridge is trying to buy a pair of shoes? Probably not. So all of those things are indicators. So again, it's just data.
Yes, it's mine.
The more data, it could be yours.
That's all your fridge buys, isn't it?
But that's when it comes down to profiling, is the fact that we now have the power to not just store all of this data and bring all of this data, but we've got the power to be able to go back to I actually call it more like a time machine. You're kind of going back to the 1970s because, I remember when I was a kid in the late 70s and we went to get a mortgage, we didn't fill in an application and send it off. I went and sat in at the bank and played with crayons when my dad spoke to the bank manager, and we got a mortgage because he knew my dad, he knew how much he earned, he knew whether he spent time in the pub or not, and he knew whether he was going to pay the money back. So we got an individual decision based on our circumstances. We can now do that again. It's been 40 years. Because in the intervening time, we haven't had the processing power. When I used to work at Visa, we had to decide how much data to throw away every day because we couldn't keep it all. It was chronic because we knew that the data was useful, but we couldn't keep it because we didn't have the storage space and we didn't have the processor power. Now the storage space is basically free, and the processor power is effectively free as well. So we can use the processing power and the data storage to be able to profile everybody back at an individual level again. So I can know that if you use your fridge to buy shoes, that's fine. But if Seamus tries to buy shoes from his fridge, probably not such a good idea. So, you start to be able to make a much more granular set of decisions. And why just stop at payment data? Why not use all the data from the IoT? And then you let machine learning sort out what's relevant and what isn't.
So the solution to the problem of IoT then is actually kind of in the back end more than in the devices. It's collecting all of that data and doing something intelligent with it.
It's what's it actually worth? I mean, it probably is a huge amount of data with a relatively little amount of signal in it. So you need the right kind of technology to be able to pick up on the signal that's in that data and decide whether it's useful or not.
Are you doing this stuff with your AI yet?
No, we're not there. I think I'd pick up on a related question about the technology pieces, and I'd call out cloud, actually. Because I think if you think about the payments horsepower in this room and ask the question, how much of it is truly cloud native, the answer would be not very much, actually. And that's at odds with other technology sectors that are evolving, that are cloud native, cloud first. And the legacy that sits across the payments spectrum, I think, is extremely strong. And pretty much 99 point something of it % would be non-cloud driven.
Is yours cloud?
Sorry?
I was going to say, I was asking her, because you're my example of a newer competitor. So is your stuff cloud-based, or are you still traditional?
We're still traditional. We're cloud ready. So
What?
yeah, we're experimenting in the cloud. We're ready for it, but not active in the cloud yet. But
Cloud ready?
Cloud ready. Yeah.
You've got great marketing people. Sitting down front.
They're around here as well.
But let's just ask you, I'm curious about this. So who runs their services in the cloud? Like Julian just said, he runs his entire business in the cloud. If the building collapses in an earthquake or something, which is quite unlikely in London, but just gets hit by a meteor or something, it doesn't really matter because you just go down the Apple store and buy some more machines. So who is completely in the cloud like Julian? Just give Seamus an indication. Okay, so you're right. It's absolutely very fluid. Who is cloud ready? We're all cloud ready, aren't we? Come on, jump on it. Get your marketing people to work. They're just sitting around doing nothing. We're all cloud ready. Okay. But let me just push this. So the solution to the IoT problem is back to the AI data back-end stuff again, right? Is that the... Okay, so you're going to put tokens in all the devices, and when those tokens are used, you're going to do back-end AI to find out if it's legitimate or not. So that to me seems like quite a rich vision, right? I mean, that sounds like there's a massive amount of opportunity out there for these people to get working on now, isn't there? So how come I don't see as much of this stuff happening as I want to? And how come every day in the paper I read about some colossal fraud that's based on bots and IoT and stuff like that? What's stopping us from getting going on this stuff?
I think there are so many devices coming up. It's really hard to control everything. And when I think of payments, I'm going to quote my second favorite payment consultant after you, Dave, James Wester. So boring in payments isn't a bug; it's a feature. Yeah, we absolutely, so payments need to work. They don't make you happy, but boy, do they make you unhappy when they don't work, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is they need to be secure. So, we're investing in AI learning to make sure that we control the data, that we can secure it. Then you need to make them fast. And only if you have kind of hit all of those three can you really go into transformation, which is going to bring in open APIs, IoT, at some point the blockchain. And so we all here want to transform the payment space, but we got to make sure that we cover our bases when we get there. And actually covering our bases is pretty hard, so I think that's why we're taking time. But some of the technology is going to get us there. And now that we can keep the data in the cloud and we can sift through it and sift through it quickly, we're going to get there.
Let's come back to blockchain, because I want to finish by pushing you on the blockchain and cryptocurrency stuff. But I just want to do a couple, before we get to that, I just want to throw a couple more technologies out to see what you're doing. And we already had a mention of this today as well. So the whole kind of VR, AR space. So I seem to remember there were quite a couple of presentations about that last year. So how are you feeling about VR, AR? Is that something that's your customers are interested in?
Certainly, we've had a lot of interest from customers that we provide enterprise software to, who are exploring those concepts, particularly from a showroom perspective or showcasing goods. It's interesting that we work heavily.
More the AR stuff,
yeah,
right?
and yeah, a bit of both, Dave. I mean, interestingly, the rise of e-commerce in the UK particularly has given rise to a number of online merchants that have got very big. And now they've kind of worked out, this thing that people want to go and see and touch and feel, used to call it stores, is actually quite a big part of the value chain still today. And so I think some of the online merchants we work with are asking themselves questions about how do we create a store without a store? How do we use VR, AR type technologies to increase our footprint? And the extent of that debate, particularly in retail, I think is very developed for sure.
VR, AR, is that on your radar?
It's on the radar, but it's a very, very niche market. I think for especially virtual reality in relation to gaming is a very, very interesting market. That's, in my opinion, the first big market where virtual reality really come into space in combination with payments. But looking at the previous topic, the Internet of Things combined with open platforms is something way more to focus on in the industry at this point, for me, than virtual reality or augmented reality.
Because I remember a couple of years ago, a couple of conferences, actually more than that, 3 or 4 years ago, people were playing around with Google Glasses and this sort of thing, where you could see the prices of things when you looked at them. That sort of stuff didn't really get traction, did it? So, but maybe in a more sophisticated version in the future. So, okay, so VR and AR, not central to plans at the moment, we would say, around that.
Only for gaming.
Well, actually, you say only for gaming, but I would have thought adult market would be, absolutely first in the VR. And historically, it's been the benchmark, hasn't it, for the use of new payment technologies, especially in the Netherlands. Okay, so so now let's get to the question that none of you want, and none of you really want to answer. But I'm going to ask it anyway, because the new technology in this space, which is lurking behind all of these things, all of the changes we're looking at, is the whole cryptocurrency, blockchain, Bitcoin space. And I know it's very difficult to work out what's going on in that space. I know that a lot of it seems rather remote and distant from, because we don't see merchants wanting to accept these current, that early flush of enthusiasm where the merchants began to accept Bitcoin. It turned out really was just marketing. It was just, so look, actually nobody actually uses it for. But maybe we were a little quick last year to say, well, then there's nothing in it. Maybe the fact that things started off slowly in our space doesn't actually mean anything about the long term. So you've all had another year to think about this and look at what's going on. I know Visa have made some investments in that space, so I'll come to you last on this one. But what do you feel about that? I mean, next year, the year after, are we going to be talking about serious competition coming in from that space?
So I divide this down into two things. One is the technology and one is the currencies. I lump all the currencies together unfairly, potentially. But I'm seeing from some of our clients, they are interested in accepting cryptocurrencies. We get into very interesting processes there around, okay, how do we attribute the funds and how they flow around? Because if I've got a stored value account somewhere and I've got one Bitcoin, $250, 50 euros, and some loyalty points, and then I pay for something and I spend 7,000 yen, how much of my Bitcoin have I spent? Was one of the questions I was asked the other day. So
isn't this the sort of boring thing that AI will do for us?
Well, it's not actually. It comes back to more of a compliance situation. So AI, is all good fun in terms of reducing false positives and all the rest of it when you get down to the AML side of things. But it's more around just fundamental process of, okay, what do these currencies mean and how do we attribute the source of funds through that kind of flow? So that's one of the areas we're looking at when you're trying to protect across an entire business with ins, outs, loyalty and all those other things brought together, because you're trying to bring all of that data into one space. And cryptocurrency is just another payment method that you've got to be able to track and flow. The other one is the blockchain technology. Now, blockchain itself is, I'm quite bullish and I'm quite positive about it, but I think for the kind of work that we do specifically at Feedzai in real time, I haven't seen a way yet technically to get blockchain to be fast enough to do what we have to do, because we're trying to do decisioning in 2 or 3 milliseconds. It's just not quick enough to do that. The technology is not there. But when it comes, it will be very useful.
Are your customers asking about this yet?
Of course. So on the one hand side, the same distribution in terms of acceptance of cryptocurrencies, but that's kind of to the side and not that massive. We're seriously looking at distributed ledger technology, not so much for payments. When cryptocurrencies first came up, everybody was going, "Oh, this is going to disrupt payments." Oh my God, it's so slow and it's so cumbersome, and the total cost of ownership. I don't know, these comparisons. Iceland, could be powered in terms of electricity. Now it's Denmark. So. But I think the distributed ledger idea, this idea that data can be held distributedly in the cloud, and we're talking about the cloud, I think that's where opportunity lies. And also the opportunity in terms of the ownership of data and how when I own the data, allow others to have access to the data. And I'm excited by that as a payment geek, but I'm also excited by that as a consumer, because I think that's the biggest problem we need to solve, that a consumer can actually own the data and then have portions of it accessible. And I think that's where it's going to become really interesting for merchants, because they can get access to specific parts of the data that are relevant to them. It's going to help consumers not to be creeped out by some of the technology as well. So,
have you started doing anything in this space yet?
Yeah, very much, Dave. I think cryptocurrencies gives blockchain a bad name, right? So unless you're a speculator, a lunatic, or a gangster, what practical application, or all of the above, what practical application are there for cryptocurrencies? It's a fad and a nonsense. But the blockchain technology, I agree with all these comments. There are 2 areas that we're exploring blockchain right now in distributed ledger. One is in relation to KYC and AML applications, and there are a number of very interesting use cases coming to market now. That's of great interest to us, particularly if you operate internationally and identity footprints straddle cross borders and all sorts of other things. The ability to maybe use distributed ledger or blockchain technology to get sense on that is really interesting. And then the other piece for us is, the notion of accounting software is similar to a central ledger, a central bank. You put all your accounting information in a central repository, but actually the laws of physics get quite interesting if you think about the notion of multiple versions of an accounting ledger and what that then enables you to do with your cash in a business. There are some very interesting ideas that we're working on right now. So for you,
it's quite an important technology for you then?
Absolutely. We envisage that accounting platforms of the future absolutely will embrace blockchain type technologies, and so we're actively exploring. We've got a team of people looking and working at that right now.
Oh, interesting. Gijs.
Especially the current cryptos and blockchain, at this point it's not efficient enough for payments, but if you look at the life cycle of the Bitcoin, all of us here probably have already said for over 10 times that it was dead and still there. So it is something which is there to stay. I still think you really need first a big crash before the technology really gets interesting. For purposes need in this industry. But the internet more or less had the same in 2002. So my hopes there are that even for payments or value storage, it could be a really good opportunity. But first, all the real bullshit needs to be out of the market. So it's way too big at the moment.
Suzanne, what's your feeling about it?
Well, I think aligned broadly with what everyone said. I think I would add one other thing to the sort of things to solve around scale and velocity, which is economic model, right? Which is perhaps what sits behind why we haven't seen that many scaled use cases. There are two use cases that I think are quite interesting. One is still a challenge for us, and that's on rewards, right? Because blockchain should advance us beyond where coalitions failed, right? Because you can never get enough scale, enough interoperability of the earn-burn side of points and loyalty currencies. And you'd think that blockchain would be sort of that factor that enables scale and utility. I think we haven't solved the right economic model, which is why we haven't seen it applied in those use cases. But business-to-business payments is a great example. We're looking at a few real use cases. Cross-border payments of all forms are, I think, enabled through blockchain. And in terms of investments, we've focused very much on infrastructure investments. Chain is one of those investments we made, because I think as the use cases become more evident, having the infrastructure to enable them is perhaps one of those right side bets we could be on. But like everyone, we're experimenting.
But a general message for the people in the room is it's time to start taking blockchain seriously and beginning to look seriously at what it can do for the business in the future. I think that's just the key point to get over. So thank you for that. Well, listen, I want to say the same thing. I want to thank the panel very much. I want to tell you the same thing, which is the panel, they didn't know what questions I were going to ask them. They came up here and gave you their honest opinions about what I think are really important trends in the technology space. And I want to thank them for being open with us today. Thank you very much, everybody.